Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. I hope all of you are well and safe. I would like to welcome our guest and speaker, Mr. Shakti Ghosal. And for before that, I would like to introduce him to everybody. Shakti sir is an alumnus of IIM Bangalore, the batch of 1984, and is a faculty gold medalist. He has more than 3.5 decades of project and training experience at global level in a range of industries spanning supply chains, aviation, tourism, engineering, maintenance, and consumer durables. He has also held leadership responsibilities in business development, strategy, negotiation, alliances, startups, as well as coaching, mentoring, and training. He undertook the Certified Professional Coach program from the International Coach Academy in 2013 and is now a professional coach certified by International Coach Federation in USA. And today he is here to talk about pandemic and how to plug into the future. Over to you, sir.
Yeah.
Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure and a privilege to be here today on this IIM Kozhikode platform, and I hope this coming 40-45 minutes of our engagement leave you with some takeaways which should support you in terms of going forward. So I have a small presentation, so I'll start that presentation at this point in time. 1 minute, please. I'll share my screen. So Sakshi, you can tell me when the presentation comes.
Sure, sir.
And then so that I can start. If you can, once you tell me the screen is shared.
Yes, we can see your screen, sir.
Great. So yeah. Okay, guys. So what we are going to talk about really is not about the pandemic. That's why I say this is there is enough information overload out there in terms of the guidance about what to do, about how to remain safe, about how the pandemic might impact various domains, how economies need to reboot, and so on and so forth. To me, really, the most disturbing visuals have been of these huge migrant flows all over the country and the way they have been walking and all kinds of things happening. But we are not going to talk about that as far as this particular presentation is concerned. What we are going to talk about is how the pandemic is going to impact you, impact each one of us. You might be students, you might have just got into jobs. I do not know the profiles of all the people who are here, but I would guess all of us, each one of us would be concerned about how the pandemic might impact our work opportunities, going forward. We might be anxious about a fact that, suppose in my domain, if the jobs start going down, what happens? Things like that. In this presentation, I am going to actually showcase 5 tools, 5 practices, which I am certain if you were to sort of imbibe, hardwire, and start using them, they would keep you in that relevance, in the most relevant space in terms of the post-pandemic environment in era. Now, ideally, I would have liked this to be a much more interactive session. However, because of the paucity of time, what we will do is you can just put your questions in the chat box, and we will take up the questions at the end of the end of the presentation, which I said would be in about 45 minutes or so. Now, there are 2 questions that I want to ask. Is there going to be a post-pandemic world? And I suppose each one of you would answer yes. The second question is a little thought-provoking maybe. And the question is, would the post-pandemic world require different perspectives and competences? And many of us may say, yeah, they would, but then we are not very certain about what they could be. Many of us hope that, no, once things pass, vaccines get developed and so on, medicines come in, we'll go back to where we were. My submission to you is that, yes, the post-pandemic world is going to be there. However, it'll come with a new normal. Um, Old reject crisis management models, models which have worked for us in the last 50 years of normalcy, in my view, are not going to work. Now, the pandemic is really a black swan event, and I think many of you would have heard of this, if not earlier, at least now. So, what is a black swan event? It's an event about which we have no past precedence, we have no past experience. What happens in such a situation? Our old caveman mindset, actually then forces us to get into that unknown, uncertain space. Why do we do that? Because we're trying to find out if there are any dangers out there. Our amygdala hijack kicks in. Our brains fill up with neurochemicals, and we get completely prepared to either fight or take flight. Let's look at some examples of black swan events to sort of take this thing a little further. For example, we know the COVID-19 is a black swan event. The financial crisis of 2008 was a black swan event. Interestingly, the internet, which came in the 1990s, was also a black swan event. So there is no good or bad black swan event. The black swan event is there. And it all depends on us how we engage with that event in terms of either sort of using it as some kind of a springboard to move forward with new learning or getting overwhelmed. I can tell you, I don't know how many of you remember, maybe not too many, but when the internet came and we say, oh, it was a great thing that happened, there were companies which went out of business. And when the financial crisis happened in 2008, there were lots of people and lots of organizations which actually did very well because of the crisis. Similarly, would happen in the case of COVID-19. This is a great slide, and I like this slide. Can you see this hourglass there? Now, look at the sand flowing. It's such a stable, such a soothing kind of flow, right? So you have these two cones, one on top, one below. Purbach, a Danish physicist, actually tried to develop a mathematical model of how the sand would flow in a sand glass. And you might think that, okay, it shouldn't be too difficult really, but he found that the pressures, tensions, and forces with which each sand particle faces in terms of all the other sand particles around it and so on and so forth was so complex, so uncertain, and so shifting dynamically that you could not develop a model. The uncertainty was really the only constant here. So while the whole structure looks very, very stable, it is the instability which is a constant here. The world that we live in, if you just think of each one of us, we are exactly like these grains. We are very granular. So we are connected with each other, with organizations. Organizations are connected through the net, through social media, through WhatsApp and what have you. And that those connections are shifting dynamically. Some connections, increases the pressure. The other connections do not. In the post-pandemic world, this granularity of each one of us is going to actually increase much more. I want you to please remember this. And why? Let's look at how the work profiles are going to pan out. You'll have much more of flat, project-based, gig-structured teams where people are engaging with each other's, people whom they have actually never worked with before, to meet a deadline and to do a particular activity or a project. This is the world that we are going to be stepping in. Now, when we face something we have never faced before, and we're talking about a black swan event, what happens? Let's try to understand the flow. our perspective immediately shifts to, as I spoke about, we delve into that uncertain, do not know space, and we try to find out what is happening, what dangers are there, what could I do. But actually, since there is no past precedence, we cannot put our plan or actions or strategy, we cannot put it on a hook of the past experience, so to say. We start feeling disempowered, which leads to us making assumptions. Now, I use the term soft trends against assumptions, and we will talk about the hard trends a little later. What is a hard trend versus soft trend? Let's try and understand this quickly with one example. Technology, which creates disruption, is a hard trend. Technology is a hard trend. What it will do, we know. How the disruption is going to happen, from which area the disruption is going to come in, is a soft trend. We do not know. We might know that yes, the technology would disrupt in some way, but we do not know how the disruption will come. So that is a soft trend. Assumptions similarly about how a situation or a technology, or for that anything, which we are not certain about, for which we have no past experience, becomes a soft trend, and we assume several things. And as we assume, we actually are getting into a high risk strategy. And when we get into a high risk strategy, we know, inside us that, look, we have assumed things. I'm not very certain how it's going to pan out. We don't have that energy. We actually start giving up even before starting. And once we fail, which is usually the case in this scenario, we start blaming the volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity, and the ambiguity of the environment. And we get disrupted there. So this is the flow that usually happens when we sort of engage the way we engage normally, with a black swan event about something which we are totally uncertain of and we do not know. Let's look at this a little more. Why do we get disrupted? You know why we get disrupted? Because we keep on trying to predict based on our past experience. Because we are conditioned, we are engineers, we are management graduates. We like to work with probabilities. We like to look at trends. We like to do trend analysis, right? So we essentially, what are we doing? We are working on probabilities. Now, since there is no past experience to really guide us, what do you think will happen? The probabilities don't seem to work. And because once they do not work, we obviously get disrupted. Before I get into this slide, let me just go back into this slide. Yeah. So I want to ask you, all of you, a question. Please think of this. Now, in a world which is getting disrupted and where the granularity is very high, like each one of us, extremely granular in terms of our connectedness, what do you think is a good model to work with? An optimized system or a flexible system? Now, many of us will think, but optimized system. We like to optimize things, whether it be in supply chains, be it in my looking at my financial analysis or let's say budgeting and anything and everything. Now, the optimized system by its very nature works because there is a trend behind us. When there is no trend, the optimized system actually doesn't work. It is the flexible system. And what is a flexible system? You actually, quite counterintuitively, you keep resources at certain additional resources, which you don't do in an optimized system. In certain places, as far as your work is concerned, so that, when something goes wrong, which you are not clear of, then you can use those resources. That becomes a flexible system. We therefore need to shift into a mindset of possibilities. Now, what is a possibility? We will just look at how a possibility mindset works, and the rest of the presentation really is about how do we do the shift. A possibility is a possibility, ladies and gentlemen, because two things. We know something about that. It has shown up in our minds because we know something about that. And we therefore are also certain about some aspects about that. So when we are certain about something, at least somewhat, and we also know some information, we start feeling empowered. And when we feel empowered, we start looking at the hard trends. We start looking at the technology side of it, so to speak. We start looking at not into the dark space, which we usually are want to go into, but looking at the technology side of things. And when we do that, we start actually adopting low risk strategies. And with that, we start gaining confidence and we get more focused and we negotiate the VUCA environment. And once we do that, we actually become disruptors. So this is, what happens in a situation where there is no past precedence. However, I need to move forward. I do not do using probability models. I use what is called as a possibility thinking, possibility mindset, and we will see how that happens. So the action number one. Now this is the first that I told you. There'll be 5 stages of practices. So this is the first practice. How do you do the shift? You actually do the shift by doing something very interesting. You start creating a context for yourself from hard trends in 3 categories. The first category is demographics. Okay? The first category is demographics. The second category is regulatory. And the third category is a good friend, technology. Now, this may sound, all very jargonistic, but so we will do a quick inquiry into this. So we'll look at all the 3 areas, and there are questions here. Now, I'm not going to read out these questions. This, in a workshop format, you would actually sit down and answer each of these questions relevant to, but what we will do is I'll take an example. So I'll take the example of the aviation industry, which, it's an industry I'm fairly familiar with. So let's look at the demographics. Customer base post-pandemic may become very different, with young people and budget travelers actually predominating. Business and elderly travels may go down. Tourism, for example, which is again something which drives travel all over the globe for some time, is going to take a backseat, may not happen. So what implications would such a situation have on, say, a company, on an airline company, how he should be, if at all, changing the seating layout, for example? A question. Customer behavior might change. So, in the past, we have been conditioned, especially when we plan much ahead. So that planning, cycle would become much shorter. People will not really plan too much into the future. They would plan 1 week, 2 weeks in advance. So what kind of changes, the booking rules or the booking system that the airlines employ needs to change so that it can drive demand? That could be the second question that needs to be asked. Let's look at the regulatory aspects. We know that it's a certainty that new safety protocols will come in place. Change in booking process itself. For example, there would be things like pre-flight testing. At least, temperature testing, maybe of certain other, lots of COVID-19 tests are getting developed. So new tests will, and you might need to register with information of your past travels and your future travels. So in one dashboard, the gentleman, when he's sort of looking at you in terms of taking your booking and then even accepting you at the aircraft at the airport, might look at all that information and may ask you some questions. How could airlines, and this is the question that an aviation professional should ask, how could airlines proactively cooperate with one another, with regulators and with others in the ecosystem to ensure a smooth and consistent customer experience, while of course also ensuring safety? Very important. Do you see how companies might shift away from competition, from having a competitive mindset to a cooperative mindset? Pandemics, black swan events actually do that. You start sort of collaborating across the board, within your domain and maybe across domains. So those are some of the regulatory things might come in. Technology. Technology again, contactless handling at the airport would become possibly the norm. So online bookings, which I think all of you do, some people still don't do, they'll be forced to do it. And boarding pass issual, even baggage check-in will be contactless. Seat allocations may be needed at times and on certain sectors, keeping aspects of social distancing. So you would have to find innovative solutions to that, and much less weight might be carried on board because you would like to avoid surfaces and stuff like that. What could that have as an implication for the additional space now available with the airlines? That's again another question. Technology would also allow airlines to start having seamless marketing partnerships with others in the ecosystem. So it could be tourism agencies, tourism companies, hotels, and how they could cooperate and increase overall demand, and how they could therefore assist and support governments and regulators in terms of setting worldwide and regional standards without, of course, affecting this safety, but improving the overall hygiene operations and so on. Now, I want you to start thinking about how such an inquiry in terms of creating your context based on these three things can be done. So this is an example. Keep it in your mind. If you want to jot down a few points, it's good, but this is how it will work. Stage 2, action 2. Now you start using that created context, right? You start using that created context to make for yourself and for your organization. Now it's all about you and your company. Three things. List of all things you are certain of. You make a list of all things you are certain of. List of all things you know. And finally, list of all things you can do. Now, I want to just showcase this through an example. Let's look at, let's say, a finance professional, right? And many of you may be actually either, on your way to become, you may be sort of really majoring in finance, or you already are working in finance. So let's look at these three aspects. List of things you are certain of. You could say, I'm certain of fintech. Fintech is going to be a big technology disruption in the finance space. You're certain of that. You may not be an expert, but you know that it's going to happen. Innovations in the form of new methods of data collection, new way to do analysis, a different perspective to investment, fresh way of putting together a report and so on. You would be certain of these things, are going to happen as far as the finance domain is concerned. List of all things you know, and you may say that, look, I have sound knowledge of accounting principles. You may say that I have the ability and the wherewithal to be able to decipher, hidden value by looking at financial reports. That could be, something which you can do. So you know this. Sorry, not you can do, but you know these things. Now, list of things what you can do, and you may say I can do budgeting. So, I can plan for optimal utilization of resources, how expenditures could be directly linked to strategies and so on. You may say that I can do forecasting through financial modeling. You may say that, I have data analytics skill. Now, you are preparing this list. As you prepare this list, the thing that you do is, so three things will come up. One is you will immediately start realizing that there may be areas which you possibly need to add into that list by gaining some competence, by doing something which you have not done, right? Reading up on something. And as you start preparing this list, a very interesting thing happens. New possibilities start showing up for you. I repeat, new possibilities start showing up for you. If you do not believe this, try it. I have tried it several times and it happens every time. And this is how you start getting into this space of possibilities. Let's look at the action number 3. And here, I'm actually asking you for 1 hour a week. 1 hour a week, you unplug yourself from the present. So let's say you're working and you have all this as problems in terms of how the pandemic situation is impacting the workspace. uh, you know Everybody can't come, and maybe there are other challenges. There is a demand challenge, there is a supply challenge. Both the challenges are happening together. You're looking at all those existing challenges. I want you to unplug yourself from all that for this 1 hour. I want you to also unplug yourself from certain beliefs which you hold. And one belief, for example, you would be holding, many of us actually hold, that is, yeah, we have a problem, this pandemic, but sooner or later, once things get sorted out, and the lockdowns will go over and the medicines will come, we'll go back to the old normal. Ladies and gentlemen, I can assure you, you will never go back to the old normal. You will see, you will go back to some place, of course, but that would be different from where we are. I want you to therefore plug into the future. And this 1 hour, you are using those contexts, those lists you have prepared to look at those possibilities, and then coming to a kind of decision in your mind that, look, these are 3, 4 possibilities, 5 possibilities showing up. This possibility is something which resonates with you, with your organization. And as it resonates, that becomes the possibility, that is the future that you have now established. You start determining hard trends. We saw, what are the hard trends and how to determine those. And as you do that, you start becoming more and more anticipatory. And you start doing what I like to call, use the jargon or a phrase, future back thinking. Now, what is the future back thinking? So I've created this one possibility which resonates with me. I actually then figuratively stand in that future. And I look back at today and I ask the question, okay, what actions do I need to take now, today, with who all, to make that future happen? This is a practice. It doesn't happen, you start doing it the first week and, you may not. But as you practice this again and again, you improve on this. Inquiry which you could do for this practice, and these are the questions, and I'm just putting them all here. Let's look at some of them. Which sectors, institutions will endure? Which ones will get impacted negatively? Where are we positioned? You, as the person who is in a company or is in a particular domain, think about it. Where are you positioned? Once you start looking at the sectors, institutions which are getting positively impacted, negatively impacted, where are you? What would be the impact on globalization? Now, whether we like it or not, we have globalized supply chains today. I mean, and Atmanirbharta is a great slogan, but ultimately, fact is that globalization is something which is here to stay. So what implications does that have in terms of your sector, your organization? Where all do you see a lack of cooperation and regulatory support? And if you do see that, what could you do about it? What kind of enhancement of your digital presence would you need to do to ensure your overall operational efficiency improves, logistical outcomes get achieved, manpower profiling, competitive advantage, so on? Look at all these aspects and see what you could do in terms of enhancing your presence in the digital world. What technology trends would impact us? And there are lots and lots of technology. We know for a fact, one thing is a hard trend, technology. The technology, and this is my view, and it's out there to be debated, but I would still like to sort of articulate it here. Technology will actually push us or accelerate us to move on certain pathways, which in any case we were moving. Work from home, for example. Technology supports, human-less checkout counters in shops. Technology exists. Those are the kind of things that may get accelerated. What kind of changes would take place in our market segments and customer profiles? How do we prepare our market presence? This is the kind of inquiry that you would do. Like I said, we don't have the time, but do it as part of this 45-minute webinar, but in a longer session, you actually would do these things until you do these things, the impact of what you're going to do next doesn't happen. So we are going through these pathways, and I would really invite you to practice these. Action number 4, in the knowledge and technology era, and ladies and gentlemen, this is a hard trend. This, is an era where knowledge and technology would lead to, groups of people, geographically spread, somebody here, somebody in the US, somebody in Australia, somebody, and from different domains coming together as part of gig teams to achieve results. Increasingly, we are going to be in that era. In such an era, what is needed from us? Let's look at that. The first thing is, I use the word relational assimilation. That is nothing, and you see, it is basically becoming more and more aware, more and more, empowered to look at stakeholder concerns and interests. The stakeholders are all right there, but your team members are also stakeholders as far as a specific project is concerned. So we sort of, when we are part of teams, many times you'll see that what happens is, so I'm good at something, so I'm good at making PowerPoint, so I'll say, okay, I'll do this, and you guys do that, and we sort of separate out activities. There's nothing wrong in that. What is more important to sort of really improve that team from doing a good job to doing a great job is to actually have that sense of each other's concerns, each other's interests. When we do that, then of course, the whole productivity, the whole way we sort of lead as part of our teams really goes through the roof. Let's look at 3 things, what you could do. First, honor your word. Sounds very simple, doesn't it? It's the most toughest thing to do. You can actually talk about this for 1 day, 2 days. The word is integrity. It has no morality there. But let's understand what is honoring your word. So let's say, one of the moderators here is Sakshi. So I have told Sakshi that I'm going to be doing something, or say I'm going to be sharing something by such and such date. And then something else comes up and I'm not able to do it. Most of us, try to sort of find loopholes, and many of us keep quiet. I need to immediately get back to Sakshi and say, Sakshi, sorry, I was not able to, I told you I will do this by such and such time. I'm not able to do that. So I'm going to now do it by such and such time. And in case there is a mess because of my not doing it, then I'm prepared to clean that mess. This is honoring your word. This is integrity. There'll be always times when you are not able to do things, of course, but to get back to all those stakeholders, all those people who are expecting me to complete something becomes of paramount importance. And organizations who have actually practiced this aspect, this concept of integrity, and there are many all over the world, and there are studies done in Harvard which have proved again and again that the performance of such organizations have gone up by 700 to 1,000%, 7 to 10 times it leaps. This is the power of honoring your word. Being and acting consistent with who you are, which is nothing but being authentic about who you are. Why are we not authentic? Have you ever thought of that? We need to be liked. We need to be thought good of. We don't want to upset somebody. So I put up the shields, fronts. And even though I may not believe in what I'm saying, but I say, but I would still show up in a particular manner. This is being inauthentic. This is again really a game spoiler when it comes to the relational assimilation. And so how do you go on the pathway of authenticity? You cannot prevent not being inauthentic, but what you can do is every time you are being inauthentic, be authentic about recognizing that. And as you become more and more authentic about recognizing every aspect of inauthenticity in your own behavior, you are truly moving on the pathway of authenticity. This is what is authenticity. And the third, listening with no intention, no judgment, no right or wrong. We are great speakers, just like I'm speaking, but very bad listeners. Unfortunately, this world has made it this way. We have to shout. We think that we have to talk loud. We have to say things before, to make ourselves heard. Not really, not really. And when you do these three things, you see a huge upswing in empathy, respect, and trust. Now, inquiry in these aspects. Let's look at these 4 questions. So you determine who are your stakeholders, what be that. You have to put in that effort to find out their interests and concerns. How could you then incorporate those interests and concerns in your plan, in the way forward plan? Now, honoring a word, like I said, I and Sakshi, I did not honor my word. Now, what is a new conversation I could start with Sakshi, which then would negate, if not fully, at least partly, that negative impact of my not honoring my word last time. So, I have the ability to start new conversations, and I can show her that, look, this time I'm going to be honoring, and I am honoring my word. In what areas do you feel a loss of personal effectiveness? This is very interesting, If you really look at all those areas where you are not being very effective, you will always find, if you dig a little deeper, that there is something you are pretending, or you are avoiding, or you are not taking responsibility of. This is what comes out of the space of being inauthentic. So as you become more and more authentic, by recognizing your inauthenticities, you start actually then minimizing those areas where there is a loss of personal effectiveness. And finally, of course, conversations you need to create which would alter how situations occur for your stakeholders. This is the inquiry sheet again for what we spoke about. Oh, I'm sorry. Action 5. This is the resilience plan. Now, what is resilience? Let me just try and quickly define it. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from a problem, from a challenge, from something which, has pulled me down. Now, many of us think that, some people are resilient and others are not. It's not true. We are not born with resilience or lack of that. It is a set of behavior. It is a mindset which, if practiced, we can improve our resilience. And in disruptive worlds, in sort of black swan event situations, this is that one quality which sort of will stand with us, as we move forward. So I'm going to show you how this is done, right? So 1 minute, yeah. So I'll take an example here. So let's look at the 4 S's. Now what happens is, and I'll bring the entire model right up here. So, okay. So the 4 S's are right up here. So what are they? Supports, strategies, sagacity, which is wisdom, and solution seeking behavior. Now, every time you are into a problem and you believe and you feel that you need the resilience to rise out of that, the way to do it is look at one past incident where actually you had a problem and you showed resilience to come out of that. Just think of that and think of what all happened, what all you did in terms of these 4 S's in that past situation. Think of them. I'm not asking you to use them here, but the sheer thinking of them, you will see, will start throwing up ideas, will you start improving your resilience with the current problem. Let's take an example, right? So I have taken this example of, I think it may sort of resonate with many of you. I mishandled a job interview and did not get the job, right? So, when we pass out of IIM Kozhikode and we go for these interviews, and, we may be looking for this particular marketing job, but, the company, the organization which came didn't select me. So I feel in the dumps, So let's look at what kind of a plan I could do there. So what kind of support that would keep me upright? So, for example, I could call my marketing prof, right? That actor, and talk to him. I could call my mentor and ask him and actually say that this is what happened. Listen to them. That is a kind of support. The sheer that activity to sort of approach somebody else, approach a couple of people, starts improving our resilience. Let's look at strategies that could keep me moving. For example, for me, it works. I go for a walk. I can do a bit of spot of meditation. Breathing technique is a great strategy to sort of adopt. Creative writing, that's what I do at times. Those are strategies that sort of put my mind away from that, and they keep me moving. Wisdom, sagacity that gives me comfort and hope. So for example, I could put a sticker on my door, and that which says that this too will pass, and for example, I may think that look, growth and my growth will come from such mistakes, because obviously I made some mistakes there, didn't get the job, it'll come from there. I can sort of start thinking of what I could do differently next time when a next interview comes in, and start jotting that down on a piece of paper. Solution seeking behavior, now this is something which many of us don't do, but I'm telling you from my own experience, it works. You can get back to the interviewers and ask what went wrong, gentlemen, and many of them, I can assure you, will actually be very happy to engage with you and tell you. You don't do it after 1 month. You do it pretty fast so that they sort of recollect, they recall, they're engaging with you. And you could think of applying to other marketing jobs. You could, for example, seek professional coaching, how to do job interviews better, and so on. So simple things, but you structure your resilience plan around these 4 S's. That's the point I'm making. These 5 action steps, folks, would support you plug into your future pathway in the post-pandemic world. This is my assertion to you. If any of you sort of go ahead and really, adopt and practice, and if you face any difficulty, feel free to get back to me. I'm happy to engage with you to support you. Now, we're just recapping here. So the heart of the plug into future leadership and performance are really these things. We start designing from the heart, which is, the other word of saying intuition. Intuition is something which you use to generate possibilities. And the head, where I'm using those context, which I created, and the context-based possibilities start showing up. So the heart and the head are 2 things that and this all comes from practice. It won't happen on the first day, but try it a few times and you will see it happening. You tie back what you are certain of, what you know, and what you can do with the organization's purpose. Now, many of us who are working in companies may feel that a purpose is what? Purpose is to make money? No, purpose is never to make. Each organization, if they are surviving, are making money. Purpose is really much more about, what is that aspect which they sort of bring into a customer's life, which the customers remember you by. For example, let's look at Coca-Cola. Their purpose statement is, we quench the thirst of the world, right? Let's look at Nokia. Nokia once upon a time was the market leader in phones, and they say we connect in different ways, in different and better ways. Look at Disney. We create a happy world, and things like that. There are many purposes there. So you tie back those 3 things of certainty, knowing, and what you can do into the organization's purpose. And that's how the alignment starts happening. Future back perspective, like I explained, is really about that, you practice to gain that ability to stand in the future, look back today, and then decide, okay, this is what I need to do today to make that future come true. Ownership of the narrative is really about understanding and then incorporating the stakeholder concerns. In the ultimate analysis, plug into future leadership and performance is really all about, this ability, and those 5 steps I talked about will give you that ability to see, comprehend, and therefore interact with the situation, with life, in fact, on an overall basis, differently than most of everyone else does. Plug into future leaders and performers, see and They are seeing the same situation, but they actually see it differently, and they therefore come to live in a different world. Thank you very much, folks, and I will now move out of this, and then we will start taking your questions. I hope you liked it. Like I said, any of you want to engage, like I said, so this is if you want to really hardwire these practices inside you, it obviously doesn't happen for this is just to showcase those practices. You actually need to get into a workshop wherein you actually do those inquiries, and we start hardwiring through basically conversations and through asking questions. So that's how it works. 1 minute, let me just go out of this. Yeah, so okay, I'm out of it. Sakshi, thank you very much. So if you can put up the questions, I'll be happy to.
Thank you so much, sir. I am sure that it will be a very helpful session for everybody who have attended. And we have few questions with us.
Yeah.
One is from Nitesh Bhuwania, which says
Yeah.
that how do you deal with the anxiety of none of the possibilities listed down come true? So there is a two-part question. The other part is the feeling that all the effort put into develop self for X possibilities may just go in vain. So how do
Yeah.
you deal with the anxiety of
Okay.
it?
Nitesh, great question, and I must acknowledge you for that. Um, now, possibility doesn't mean that it is a certainty, but the possibility as a space is a far better space than being in a probability space, especially in situations which I know nothing about. So I have the choice. I can keep on delving into the dark, uncertain space and trying to figure out what I should do, looking at things which are really not sort of connected, but I still try to find solutions out of those. That's one way. And then actually getting disrupted, like we saw, or we look at start creating possibilities. Now when you say none of those possibilities work, yes, it can happen. But as soon as none of those possibilities which initially came up did not work, you will yourself see new possibilities showing up. To take the example of Michael Faraday, right? So you must have heard of that. I don't know how true it is, but he was asked that, Mr. Faraday, you took what 1,878 times to create the light bulb. And he said, yeah, of course, because those 1,878 were different possibilities I looked at, and one of them finally worked. So that's how. Now, the anxiety is something which is within us. Frankly, a situation does not create the anxiety. Anxiety gets created by how I am looking at that situation, how the situation shows up to me, for me. As soon as you move into a possibility space and you start following these 5 action steps, I can assure you that your anxiety levels will start going down. They may not vanish, but they'll definitely go down. Yeah. So that's my answer.
So I hope Nitesh sir answered your question. And there's one more question. Being someone working in the consumer retail industry, how do I capitalize on this framework for immediate short-term and long-term period?
You're talking about a very specific domain, and you're talking about the consumer retail space. And I don't have to tell you, we don't have to kid ourselves. We are going to go through a huge challenge. But what is the framework really doing in its essence? It is supporting you to create a context for yourself for the consumer space using those 3 things: the demographics, the shifting demographics of your customers, the new regulations that may come in force, and the new technologies that may be showing up already. Now, once I start looking at those 3 things, and I also start looking at the consumer behavior shift, it would be a struggle. Nothing is easy in life, but the 5 action step methodology will actually position you to be much better placed than everyone else. See, ultimately, uh, the only way I'm going to do or I'm going to survive. Survival is maybe is a word with negative connotations, but nonetheless, when I am able to do something or engage with a situation better than others, right? So even if, let's say, there are 10 people engaging, and 9 of them are failing, the one fellow who's going to succeed is because he engages better. The 5 action step is nothing but showing you a practice or a set of practices to be able to recognize, engage better. It's okay. Let me take another example here, maybe, but just so you can learn things by observing, right? So I observe, I then shift my this thing, and I then do something, and then I analyze what has happened, and again I go into the next cycle and observe, and like that, right? Now look at it this way, that uh, uh, who was this? What was the name? Nitin, right? What is the name
This
of the
is
person?
this is from Abhishek.
Abhishek. Okay, Abhishek, you and I are watching a tennis match from the stands, and let's say I know tennis and you don't know, and so I'm showing you. See how Roger Federer, when he hits like this, his opponent has to hit the ball back like this, and you keep on watching, and you keep on watching, and we keep on watching this, day in day out, day out. What happens? You over a period of time realize that, yeah, okay, so I know that. I know everything there is to understand about tennis, right? Just like reading a book. So I've understood. The next step, I give you a tennis racket and I say, now, Abhishek, please go out on the tennis court and play. Do you think you will be able to do that? You know everything there is to know in terms of responding. The answer is you will not be able to play. How we play is when we actually are in the court rather than sitting in the stand, and allowing situations and circumstances to be coming towards us. It is in that moment what you do. And that is not really, doesn't it, I mean, it's a mindset issue. What we did in those 5 steps is basically trying to develop a robust mindset which is able to take care of such eventualities. That is how it works, in life. We sort of do case studies, where when we are in Kozhikode and we have done great jobs. But how much of those case studies really we are able to implement? Yeah, that is there. It's a kind of a learning. It's a searchlight behind my head pointing, some lit areas as to maybe, yeah, this is the way to go. That's it. So that's my response.
Sure. Thank you, sir. There's one more
Please.
question. Our hypothesis about context-based possibilities.
How do we test our hypothesis about?
And how to seek others' help. Context-based possibilities.
Yeah.
And how to seek others' help in developing a coherent view on future possibilities.
How do we test our hypothesis about context-based possibilities? See, it's I mean, I don't know from in what this thing you're asking. When you are looking at context-based possibilities, you really are not creating hypotheses there. You are only looking at all possibilities out there at this point in time, and you end up choosing one possibility out of that. So there is no hypothesis aspect really coming here. We are not doing an experimentation here. This is real life. Okay, and we don't have time to create hypotheses and test hypotheses. That a hypothesis, by the sheer definition of the word, is something which needs to be tested. And a testing of a hypothesis is only possible if I have some past experience, past data to allow me to do that. A black swan event, by its very definition, does not allow me to do that. So I don't have the ability to create hypothesis here. So I've created the possibilities, and I choose a possibility, And then I start, having chosen the possibility, then I sort of move forward on that particular possibility, and I stand in that possibility and look back and start taking actions today. The faster I take actions, and those circuitous, this thing of observing, acting, analyzing, observing, and going up, if I'm faster than other people, I can assure you that I will succeed much more number of times compared to others. That's the way it is.
Sure. Thank you so much, sir. Just one more last question that we'll take for today. So Ankit Jain wants you to elaborate on the future back thinking through a small example.
Okay. So let's. Okay. May I, Ankit? Are you what? Okay, I don't know whether he can answer this. What domain is he in, or shall we look at the domain of let's say I don't know what, consulting or finance or something like that? Can we take that?
Yes, sir. We can.
Okay. So let's look at a domain of consultancy. Right? So we are talking about those project-based teams, the gig teams, right? Now, you've decided that the project teams are going to actually start working in a particular manner. So let's assume now you have decided that, look, they are going to be, first of all, working from home. They would be doing enormous amount of self-learning. There would be domain experts. There would be also people who can recognize disruptions as the disruptions are happening. There would be technology people. Let's say there are all these people, and you have decided that this seems to be a possible future as far as consultancy is concerned. You stand in that future and you are looking back today. What is it that you need to do to make that future come? One clear thing, and we saw it in that slide, is start improvising and improving your relational assimilation. Start looking at ways and means of being able to unearth the interests and the concerns of other people who are part of your team. We usually do not do that. How do I engage doing that? If I start looking at today and start saying, now I'm going to be doing this today, and I'm going to therefore achieve this relational assimilation today, I would then start establishing aspects of those three things, parameters. Let's say one of them is honoring my word. And there could be a situation, I look back today and I've seen that I was working with this guy, he's part of my team, and I did not honor the word. What could I do today to improve or to sort of get back out of that situation? Those are the small things that you can do today, because you are standing in that future of being a great consultant, and you are acting on those things today. That is what future back thinking is all about. It's a mindset, really. I can look at trends and I can try and determine, acha, aisa ho sakta hai. Or looking at the possibility, I have established a future. Now this is how it is going to be. Now let me look back. I can do both ways. And it is not that the first way is wrong. I'm just showing you another way of doing the same thing. Yeah. Who's this? Idea of shift towards flexible from optimal system organization by way of cooperating instead of competing is a very, yeah, it is. I mean, the so-called let's say optimization, if at all I'm going to be looking at the optimize, nothing wrong with an optimized model, but if I'm going to be doing if I have a mindset of a global optimization and I am sort of working on myself to become one of the best there is in terms of the players, I don't have to be worried about with whom I'm actually going to be collaborating with. It could be my competitor. It could be airlines. For example, Indigo may start and would like to start cooperating with SpiceJet, who would like to start cooperating with this star, and so on. They are competitors but in the greater scheme of things, if I am close to my knitting, so to say, and I have sharpened my saw, by using these 5 practices, I have nothing to fear about.
Right, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. I thank you from all of the IIM Kozhikode community for this intuitive session, and I really hope that all of this would really help us cope and improve in the post-COVID-19 situation. So, thank you, sir.
Thank
I
you.
hope
And
all of
just one thing. Anyone, if there are doubts and all, you can engage with me offline, and I'm happy to support you in any way I can.
yes.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you all for joining
Thanks.
this webinar.
Bye.
Thank
Take care.
you.